This
Let me know if
conference
you
will
can see
now
me.
be recorded.
Actually, I'll come from the beginning onwards. What is the deadlock? In a database, a deadlock is a situation in which two or more transactions are in waiting for one another to give up the locks. Example, I have a transaction and it might hold the lock on one particular table, but on the same table, another transaction is trying to do the different transactions, trying to perform the different transactions on the same table. So the time the first transaction is already applied, the mutually locked means that the table is locked by transaction one, but in the transaction to the same table is trying to do another transaction. That time there will be a problem. So there might be a chances to happen the deadlock. So this is the deadlock. How we will capture the deadlocks, I will show it to you now. We have a concept called dbcc trace on. This is the one command in the database, that is yes, we have one command called dbcc. Can you see my SQL Server database?
Yeah. We lost your screen share, Suresh.
Yeah. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Is it visible now?
Yes.
Okay. Now we have one command called dbcc trace on. This is the number which is to trace the errors in the database. That is 1222 is the number which is to trace the errors in the database. So the command is dbcc trace on. Within the bracket, we have to pass this. This is the default one, which is 1222. Here, -1 is the optional one, which is if we want to set the trace level on the session level, then we have to we need not to pass anything. Simply directly we can just pass dbcc trace on 1222. That's it. And if we want to pass, that means if we want to capture the deadlocks or errors at the global level, meaning you are accessing the SQL server, means or you are trying to access the SQL server by using the UI, and some other persons are, because simultaneously different people are hitting the database, right? That time, that is the global one, means not only single person, multiple persons are accessing the database. That time I want to capture all the errors, so in the database, that is the global one. So if I want to capture at the global level, then I have to pass the -1 here. This will be passed at the global level. This will be tracked at the global level. Now, to check the trace status, whether it is accessing or not, whether the tracing is capturing or not, to check that one, the command is dbcc trace status. So now let's check this, whether the tracing is on or not. Now I'm executing this command. Now just check status is 0. Global at the global level, which is 0, at the session level, which is 0, meaning I'm not capturing the deadlocks or errors in the table now. So if I want to capture at the global level and then session level, how to execute this command dbcc trace on within the bracket 1222 comma -1. This is the first command. I'm just setting this one, and after that I'm just removing this one, and then I'm trying to capture at the session level also. So I'm executing now these two. Now just check this one, run this command. Now you can see the status is 1, meaning I'm capturing the errors or deadlocks at the global level, which is fine. 1 meaning like yes, I'm capturing it. At the session level also, I'm capturing this one. So now if I want to set this one to off, I do not want to capture the deadlocks or errors, run this command dbcc trace off within the bracket, pass this 1222, which is to capture the errors, and then pass -1 or nothing. It's an optional parameter, which is we need not to pass anything. Execute this, then check the status at the global level. At the session level, which is 1, I'm setting it up, and then at the global level I have disabled this one. I'm not capturing this one, so it is set it to 0. Now I want to capture at the both levels, so I'm just passing here as 1. I'm again setting it to true, which meaning I'm planning to capture at the both levels, like it's a session level. At the same time I just wanted to capture at the global level also. So now by using these commands we can just capture the errors. We can check the status of that, whether we are capturing the deadlocks or not, or else we can just set it to off also. So now I'm going to show you how we will capture the deadlocks. I have a transaction now. I have a table called it's a deadlock test one. I'll show it to you now. Select star from deadlock test one. Here I have few records, like it's a 1, 2, 3, 4. Suresh Kumar Ashrita 3, 2, 4 records I have, and another table called deadlock test 2. I have here one record within the table, which is Adya. Now I'm going to execute this transaction. Then parallelly I will execute another transaction also, which is to show you the deadlock. 1 second. This is the transaction one where I'm doing it. This is the transaction one, and then this is the transaction two. Now I'm trying to execute. I'm going to begin the transaction, and I'm updating that in the table one, in the deadlock test one. I'm setting the name to updated by transaction one, where for all the records I'm executing this. Now let's execute this command. Now I'm going to second transaction, and I'm opening another transaction. I'm updating the second table with name updated by transaction 2. Now I'm going to transaction 1. I'm updating the second table which is already in the transaction, in the another transaction actually. In the second when you say this is already in the transaction which I have not committed the transaction. But at the same time, I'm going to update with the different value. Now let's execute this, then do it. I'm executing that one more command in another transaction. Now check what will happen. I got the deadlock. Transaction process ID 58 was deadlocked on lock resources with another process and has been chosen as a deadlock victim. Return the transaction. Meaning at the same time, two transactions cannot update the same table. One has to be done, then only the second transaction can be completed. So based on which, what is the victim, the database SQL server itself only will identify based on the least priority one, meaning like how the deadlock victim will identify, which is the more button one, which will not take that one as a victim. So which one is the least bothered one to return that one, that will be taken as a victim, and then it will roll back the transaction automatically. So here it is selected this transaction as a victim, and then it has been already rolled back, so the data will not be updated in the database. Now as I have completed this transaction, I'm committing this transaction in the database. Now let's execute. Now this is done. Now I just wanted to check how I'm going to this one. I'm capturing this one in my SQL server. I just have to check that. Now I'm going to execute one query. Let's check this. Sorry. This is execute sp underscore read error log. Now try to execute this. Check this. Come down. Check the today's date. Today is the 11th February. Now go little up. At 8:49, I got the deadlock. This is that. From here, I got the deadlock. So take this one out, copy this information and paste it in the SQL Server or in Notepad, and then check where exactly we'll have the deadlock. This will give the information for what is the process ID, what the statement we are executing when we are getting the deadlock. Everything it will give. This one to identify what is the deadlock, where exactly we got it. This identification, this research part I'm going to cover it in the live sessions. But to capture the deadlock, as I told you, we have the DBCC command, which is a trace on, trace of, trace status, which in the bracket we have to give the 1222 number to capture the errors or deadlocks in the database. This is the deadlock concept. Now I'm going to explain you another concept, which is like a clustered index. I hope you heard already about that indexes. Index is like a page. We have a page called like any book. When you take that one, we'll have something like in that page actually we'll have the indexes, like to identify the where exactly to go to the particular location directly. Say for example, I have a 100 pages book which contains the syllabus. So I just wanted to search for one syllabus directly. What we'll do in the book, if we have the hard copy of the book, directly we'll go to the index part which is available in the backside of the textbook. Then we'll go and then we'll just check for the text, and then we'll just identify in which page exactly the content or that concept is available. Like that way in the database also, the index will work as it is itself only. So that the index will set the data in a particular format, in the particular order. Either it is in the ascending order or either it will be in the descending order. So when we are, the index will be applied on the group by clause. Say for example, if we have search operation, or else if we have order by operation, or if we have group by operation, we have to use the index based on these three scenarios. So if I have a table without index, I'll show you that one, how the table will give the information. Here I have a table called employees. I'm creating this one because for the speed of the process, I have the SQL script already. So here I'm creating the employees table, which is having the employee ID, first name, last name, email, phone number, hire date, salary, address, city, state, country, pin code. And I have the insert query also. Here I'm inserting the 4 records, which is like I'm inserting the employee ID 5 first, then 3, then 2, then 4, then with that first name, last name, email ID, and then all the necessary details I'm giving it. Let's execute this command now. Let's run this. This is done. I have executed this command now. Now just check the employee table. Select star from employees. How the information is came now. Now 5, 3, 2, 4. In which order we have inserted the data, in the same order itself only we'll have the data to in the display purpose. When we are fetching the data from the database, in what order we have inserted the data, in the same order itself only the information will come. So, but ideally, as per the requirement, how the data should display, because if you want to speed up the process, what will give ideally, see in the search operation, when you are fetching any information, either will give the employee ID or will give the first name or last name. Based on this information itself only, we'll fetch the records. We will not fetch in single shot all the records in the real-time scenarios. If you are trying to get any information, That time, if we are keeping the information in particular order, then that will be easier to look into the table for the SQL server itself. Then it will speed up the process, and then it will give the result in fraction of seconds if the data is in particular order. Now when you see these records, this data is not in order. So if we have lakhs of records, if we want to fetch any thousands record which I have inserted at the 10,000 time, so that time SQL server wouldn't know where exactly the 10,000 record is existed in the database. So it has to look each and every data, then it has to fetch the information as per the expectation from the as per the requirement from the customer. So now I'm going to apply the index on this table, then we'll see how it will work. Now for this, to apply the index on this, now what I'm doing is I'm just dropping the table, drop table employees, just execute this. Now select start from employees. You will not find any records because that employees table I have dropped it, meaning I have physical table itself and I have deleted it. Now I'm creating the employee table with the index. Now come down, I have one more query which is like I'm creating the employees with the index. Now we'll see. I'll show you. Control R. Here in this table, here I have employee. Here I'm creating the constraint, which is a primary key. By default, if we create any primary key, there will be a clustered index will be automatically created on a particular table. Every table in the good database, the clustered index will be automatically be there because we'll create the primary key on each and every table. So the primary key itself only will have the clustered index on that, meaning it will automatically set the data in a particular order. Now I'll execute it and then show it to you. I am going to insert the data in the same way which I have already inserted in that previous example, 5, 3, 2, 4. Now let's execute this statement. Now I'm executing this. Now check this employee table. Select star from employees. Now see 2, 3, 4, 5 is kept because the logical order in the ascending order, the SQL server itself only has kept the data in the memory, which is a which it's already kept this order in the memory. So when we are fetching the data from the data table, it will check for the index. Just that there is an index was created on the table, so the data is already kept it in the particular ascending order. So to fetch the data, it will be very easy. So now I wanted to fetch the record at the 5th position, 5th row. As the data is already kept this in the particular ascending order, so for the database also it will be very easy to get the information very fast. So indexes are very useful to retrieve the data. Index can be created based on the scenarios like the search operation. Say for example, you are searching the information by using the first name, so you can just create the index on the first name, or maybe you can just create on the combination also. You can set the create the index on the combination like first name and then phone number, or maybe last name and the address. So whatever the scenario, whatever the priority, based on the requirement, you can just create the index and then you can perform it for the speed of the process. All right, got it? Any questions for now?
Yeah, Suresh, I have one question.
Yeah, tell me.
So in live examples, right, where when we are dealing with live situations, every database has a primary key, which means
Correct.
every database will have clustered indexes along with the primary key.
Correct.
So in what cases do we have to say the AD team or the development team, see boss, only primary key index is not working, so we'll have to include more indexes.
Say
So
for
in what
example,
cases? Yeah.
yeah, I'll give it to you. Now primary key, say for example, I'm giving it to you like employee ID is the primary key here, right? So
Correct.
always on the unique one, that employee ID, which you cannot do that one. This is for internal purpose, because even
Correct.
say, for example, when you are working on it on any one of the companies, the employee ID, say for example, E starts with 1, 2, 3, 4 is your employee ID, right? But
Yeah.
internally for that one row will be created with the primary key that will not be mapped to that employee ID, right? That will not be same as the employee ID. That will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like that it will be. It will keep on
Correct.
incrementing one by one, right? So I am creating the index on this ID itself only, not on the employee ID, which will starts with the E 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. I'm not creating the index on that. By default, a clustered index will be there on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever I'm creating it, right?
Okay.
Got it? Okay. Now what you are doing by default, when you are searching the data from the employees table, directly you can give that select star from employees, right? That time it will speed up the process. But you are searching the employees table by using the first name or by using the employee ID directly, which is like, say for example, where EID equal to, here I don't have that ID, but simply I'm just typing it here, E12345, right? You are always searching based on this EID, which is like employee ID. So
Correct.
in all the places you are searching by using this employee ID, right? So the bare condition, which is like a search parameter, you are always using the employee ID. So you can ask the developer, I am always in the search parameter, I'm using the employee ID, which is EID. So please go ahead and then create the index on the particular column, so that the data will be set on this ID and it will keep the data in a particular order, so that when you are searching by using this keyword, it will be easier to SQL Server to fetch the records. Got it? Or else,
Yeah.
example, next example, you are searching the information by using the email, right? So in the 10 places, more frequently you are searching the information by using the email, but index
Correct.
is not created on the email. So you can just ask the employee to create the index on the particular email column.
Okay.
Right? How you can create the index? I'll give it to you, that syntax also for that. Maybe you can.
Correct. So, Suresh, one more thing.
Yeah.
How do we know how many indexes are created for a particular database?
I'll tell you.
Sure.
We have a command, like how many indexes are there created in the database. We have a command, so that it will list out all the information by means how many index information on the particular table, how many are created in that. Okay, that I have a command for, we have a command for that, in the live scenarios, maybe I can show it to you. Is it fine?
Okay. Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay, then so now if you want to create any index on your particular own also, you can create. See, as I told you, we have two types of indexes, right? One is like a clustered index and non-clustered index, right? So for the clustered index, only one will be there. Okay, yeah, but non-clustered index can be any number of things, but one table can contain maximum of 99 index itself only. All right, more than 99 indexes cannot have one particular table. You cannot create more than 99 indexes on a particular table. And that too, there is a drawback when you are creating the index also. Okay, you have to be sure when you are creating the index, because in the employee table, always you are doing updating. You are doing some update statement, you are performing it. Okay, and you are doing the delete operation on a particular table. Okay, so but you say for example, you are always updating the employee first name. I'm giving one scenario itself. Okay, you are updating the employee first name, but on the particular column itself only you have created the index. Okay, that time if you have created the index on the particular column, what SQL Server will do, it will set the records in a particular logical order by ascending or descending order. Say for example, employee 1 is there, employee 2 is there, employee 3 is there. Now name, that is employee 1, employee 2, employee 3 is the name. Okay, now you have created the index on the particular employee name itself. Now but always you are updating the employee name column also. That time what will happen? You are changing the employee name 2 to maybe Suresh, employee 3 to maybe Ganesh, employee 3 to maybe some other Deepa or something. What SQL Server will do, as you have already created the index on the particular table, SQL Server will again rescan the particular column. It will just set up the information in the logical order, either by ascending or descending. So what is happening when you are updating or when you are inserting or when you are deleting? Again, SQL Server looking for the index. Again, it is resetting the data in a particular order. So the two things are happening always. When inserting one thing, and then setting up in the logical order again second thing. So two things are happening if you have the index. So you have to make sure that if any transactions or more transactions are happening on the particular table, on the particular row, you should not create more indexes on that. Okay, it will improve the performance. At the same time, the drawback is it will decrease the performance also when you are inserting the data. Got it? So that you have to make sure that when you are creating the index, you have to make sure what is happening, what will happen when I'm creating the index on a particular table. Okay, so now to drop the constraint, I'm just running this constraint from here, because when I'm creating the primary key, directly that clustered index will be created. So now from the employees table, I'm dropping the constraint directly. Sorry, one second. What is the constraint name? Let me check this. Constraint employee ID, which is constraint name employee ID. Go ahead and delete. Now you can create the clustered index on your any particular column. Now earlier when I create the custom clustered index means primary key, by default on the employee ID one index is created. Now I'm creating the constraint itself only, like it's a primary key itself. Now I'm creating the clustered index on different column. Like if I want to use first name, I can use the first name here. Whether if I have the first name or not, let's see. Yes, I have the first name. Now take this first name and then create the index on the employees clustered index. Now let's execute this. This is the one which I have the index on the particular table. Now let's go and verify the employees table. See here, index is created on the first name now. Index is. You can see this, right?
Yes.
Any questions?
Good, Hector. How are you?
Sorry,
yes.
You're good or you're good, right? Hello, I didn't get your question. Can you repeat, please, if you have any questions?
Okay. 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 Okay.
Can everyone go on mute, please, because someone is talking on the phone. Now, I'm going to show you one more concept from the database itself only. Now, select star from employees. Let's execute this. Now, in the employees table, I have created date, created by, modified date, modified by, and is active also here. Okay, now when I'm searching any information, when I'm trying to fetch any information from the employee particular table, if I put star, then it will retrieve all the records. Example, if I have the 5 records or 4 records, which is fine, but in the live database I'll have thousands of records. When I put star mark, it will try to fetch all the columns, all the rows from the database, which is incorrect, because I do not want to show it to the user like created date, created by, modified by, and then modified date and is active column to the user. and I do not want to fetch that information because this is for internal logging purpose itself only. More than that, I do not want this information to be captured in the UI or when I'm trying to fetch the information. So for that, we should not always use the select star. Always we have to get the information by using the column names itself only, like employee ID, comma, first name, comma, last name, comma, email, comma, phone number. So whatever the columns you want, you have to use by comma separated itself only. We should not use any star when we are getting the information from the database, because as I told you, the star will retrieve all the information from the database, which is incorrect, because there will be a more burden when we are retrieving from the database. Because if I have a lakhs of records, these 5 columns itself only, say for example taking 10 KB of size, and then when I'm exporting this data to that Excel sheet or something, again this will be exported along with this other data. So the Excel sheet size also will be more. To export it, it will take more time. So whatever the data we need it, we have to always use the column names. Then it will fetch the records as fast as possible. Then to export it to any means Excel sheet or CBV or maybe any notepad also, it will be faster. So the better practice is not to avoid the star. Then we have another concept. In any questions now for the select star from or something? I guess no question because it's a simple concept. Now I'm deleting again one table, like drop table employees. Now we have a concept called, share that. Yeah, we have a concept called system version temporal table, which is a system version temporary table is a type of a user table designed to keep a full history of your data changes to allow easy point in time analysis. This type of temporary table is referred to as a system version temporary table because the period of validity for each row is managed by the system itself only. Every temporary table has two explicitly defined columns, each with a date time to data type. These columns are referred to as the period columns. These period columns are used to exclusively by the system to record the period of validity for each row whenever a row is modified. I show it to you with the example now. Let's flip to database now. I'm opening one query. Now I'm creating the employee table with, as I told you, like for version, to maintain the versioning, we have two columns, which is like system start time, date time to, as I told you, this data type is date time to. Here you can find out this generate always as row start, which is like it's a starting date it will have, and this is like until the modification date it will have the row end date. So we have two columns, extra columns, like the system start time, system end time, and we have one more period for system time, start date and then end time. Now I have created one more constraint. Here I am setting versioning equal to on. The history of the employees, if we modify or if we delete, that will be maintained in the employee history table. The name which I have given in the system versioning equal to on, and the history table is employee history. Now I'm inserting the table in the employee and in the history table. Now Let's execute this. Check this employee table now in the database. Just refresh, expand the tables. You can see this employees. For other tables also we have like a deadlock test 1, deadlock test 2. The icon beside the table name is different with the table rows it is having. But here when you see this for employee table, within the bracket we have system version, because I am creating the versioning also on this table. So it has the table with the rows and columns and the time symbol also. That icon is something different, meaning I'm maintaining the system versioning on this table. Now let's check whether I'm maintaining the system means versioning or not. Now let's select star from employees. Now just check. I have the 3 information. Now for the versioning, I'm creating the history also. I have created one more table in my query, right? Now check this history. It will not have any data because I have only inserted the data, which is I have not modified anything. So when I'm modifying any data, then only the version will be maintained. The primary, when I'm inserting first time, the data will only be available in the main table itself only. When I update that information, any of the information from the main table, then only the history will be captured. Let's see with the example. Now update employees, set first name equal to version I'm giving, where employee ID equal to 1. What I'm doing here is I'm just updating the employees table. I'm setting the first name to version. Earlier that first name is Isha, but I am updating that information to version where employee ID is equal to 1. Let's execute this statement. One row affected. Now let's check the database now. Select star from employees. Now check in the employees table. I have the version, but where is that old value, which is like Isha earlier it was there. Now it is not there. Now check in the history table. Select star from employees history. Now let's check this. See, for the particular employee, the old name is Isha and all other remaining information will be captured from the table whether it is modified or not. So I have earlier record, the previous record when I was inserted is Isha. Now that is updated to version. Now example, set this one to again, say for example, test 2. Now I'm updating this one to test 2. Let's do that. One row affected. Check in the employees table. Now the value would be test in the employees history table. See how many records are there now. We have 2 records. First time at the insertion time, the value was Isha. Then after that, the first update is with the version. Then the second update is test. So like this way, we can just maintain the history. But in the ideal scenarios, in the live scenarios, most of the developers will handle these kind of concepts by using the triggers, which is SQL triggers. The trigger will fire on insertion of the data or updated the data or whenever we have deleted the data. So the trigger is to capture the data when any of the DML operation is happened on the particular table. So if the trigger, if it is there, it will insert the data in the history table, but it will be a more burden to the SQL server to capture the information, to fire the trigger, to capture the information in the history table. And we have to separately create the employee history table and to capture the audit log purpose logs, whatever the information we are updating it or whatever the information we are deleting from the table. So To avoid the burden to the SQL server, we can just use the version, system version. So it will be easier. So we need not to do anything. If we are deleting or if you are updating, by default the SQL server will capture the information and then it will keep the information in the history, whatever the table name we have given at the time of creation of the table. Any questions on this topic?
Suresh, how is this temporary table related to performance? As in, how does it correlate to performance engineering? I mean,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
what only. See, in the banking domains, or because always most of the people will work on BFSI domains itself only, right? So you have the customer information, right? You have the customer, say for example, Suresh customer information only. I am the one of the customers for one particular bank. Now you have at the time of creation of the customer, you have given some address. Okay, customer, just say for example, Suresh is staying in the Hyderabad. So in the address table, you are giving the address as a Hyderabad. Now, right? Now, whenever you are updating from the Hyderabad to I'm moving to Bangalore, say for example, now I'll call to the customer care service. I'll ask them to update that address to Bangalore or something. They will update that information to the Bangalore. But if you are not capturing that all the history, you will not find the track. Maybe next day or maybe after few days, I may call to the customer care service again. I'll ask them like, hey, I have not requested any information to update it. My previous data, maybe this is Hyderabad or something. So for that, to track that one, whether the whatever the customer is giving the information to the service agent, whether that information is correct or not, or maybe the customer only will expect some historical statement for the address historical statement. That time the bank or someone has to be able to provide the information, the historical, that audit log should be able to provide to the customer. So that time we have to capture this information. How the people in the development, in the real-time scenarios, most of the people will use the triggers to capture these kind of audit log purpose. The trigger will fire whenever, say for example, I can write the trigger on the employees table. So when I'm writing the trigger on the employees table, the trigger will be fired on the DML statements on or before insert the data, on or before modified the data, on or before deleted the data. Okay. So now when I am updating the table, if say for example, if I have written any trigger, so that by using the trigger, that information will be captured in the history, right? But to do so, SQL Server always has to fire again one more trigger. It has to look into the table and it has to insert the table data in the history table. But by default, as I told you, one concept called system versioning, the SQL Server need not to fire any trigger again. It will internally will take care of that one. It will maintain the history, so that for the logging purpose, it will be easier to get the historical statement. Any questions? Did I answer your question or any confusion?
Yes, understood.
Right? So always most of the scenarios, maybe you can just observe in your live database. If you want, maybe in the development database or in the testing database, you can find out most of the triggers. Triggers are useful, but not in this scenario. In these scenarios, always we have to go for the versioning table itself only, so that the performance will be improved. How we will get that information if we have the historical data from the both of the tables is once. Now, if I want to get any information from the employees table by using the history also, I have a simple query. Say, like select star from employees table for system time between, I'm giving the dates, today date only I'm passing it, for employee ID 1. Say for example, if I'm getting this one, if I write the query like the select star from employee, I'll get only from the employees table itself only. But if I give the history table, when I see this select star from employees history, you will get the information only from the history table. But here in the different way I have written the logic, like for system time between I'm giving the dates. Now let's execute this. From all the three tables I'll get the information. Initially this is the one, and the next time I have set that one to version, then the third time I have updated to test. So like this way I can fetch the information from the history table, from the both the tables. Any questions?
No, I'm clear.
Now I'm going to show you one more concept, like it's a multi-threading in the .NET side. Now till now I have covered the database side, but only one concept I will cover now in from the .NET side, because people are working on the .NET side also, right? So I'll share you one example for the .NET side also, so that you will have an idea. I'm sharing my screen again, slides. Let me know when you can see. We have a concept called multi-threading, which is like a thread is an independent execution path able to run the simultaneously with other threads. If our application involves complicated and time-consuming operations, then it is often helpful to set different execution paths or threads, with each thread performing a particular job. Thread is a lightweight process, that you know, because whenever we are opening any application, thread is any application will have in the task manager with the process ID something will have. Say for example, if you are opening any calculator in the computer, with that in your taskbar, when you are seeing that one, with the calc.exe one process ID will be created, meaning the thread is the process is a thread parallelly, which is a main thread. So whenever if you are opening any Chrome also in the task manager, when you see chrome.exe one process will be running background. So you can kill that process also. That time when we are killing that process, automatically if you open the Chrome, if you kill that Chrome by using the task manager, that Chrome itself only will be closed. So the thread is a lightweight process, and then the thread is equal to a process. So multi-threading meaning like parallelly to run the multiple process at a time. I'll show it to you with the example now. Share my screen with the Windows application. I have created one Windows application now. In the Windows application, actually I have I'll show it to you with the design. Now I have one button called complete DB operations, and then one more button called print, and one button is called list of numbers. When I am clicking on this DB operations, say assume I am performing some database operations. To complete the database operations, it is taking 15 seconds of time. So when it is taking 15 seconds of time, after clicking on this button, I cannot click on this button, because it is running the background one main thread in the background. Until this is completed the action, I cannot click on this print button to do another action. So here what I have done is, here in the complete DB operation, on click of that button, I'm setting those button like it's a complete operation button and then print button to disable, and I'm doing the database operations now, and I'm going to, once after the database operation is completed, I'm going to enable these two buttons now. So in the print, in the database of in this method, what I'm doing is I am just putting that thread to sleep for 10 seconds. But ideally, with the example, just sample example, I'm giving it to you. Here actually our database operations will come. But to do the database operations, it will take time. In the real-time scenarios, we'll have the database operations. But for the better understanding purpose, I'm setting the system ideal for 10 seconds, which is in milliseconds equivalent to 1 second. Here like it's a 10,000 milliseconds, which is equal to 10 seconds. Now I'm executing this application. Oh, 1 second. Screen. Now, this is my application. When I'm clicking on complete database operation, what is happening? See, these two buttons are disabled. Until 10 seconds, it will not be enabled to click on this print button because this is disabled now. Now, when I click on this button, this is happening. Again, when you click on complete DB operations, again this is disabled, meaning it is trying to complete one operation in the background. Until this is done, we cannot click on this button, as this operation has to be completed. This is hitting the database, it is fetching the information from the database, or some task, some actions it is performing on this button click. So to avoid this, what I'm doing is, simply I'm creating one thread. So what I'm doing is I'm commenting this line, because do database work is the method which I have to call it. But rather than directly calling in the complete DB operations directly, I'm opening one more thread, which my thread name is sample thread for DB operations, and I'm calling that function inside that thread. Right here, the same operation I'm calling by using the threads. Now I have declared the thread, but we have to start the thread, then only the thread will start parallelly. Until and unless we call this start, the thread will not start. Actually, it will be created, but the thread will not start. The same operation I am doing, but by using the threading concept, which is like a multi-thread concept. Now go and execute this. Complete the DB operations. Click print button. This is not disabled. Did you observe this? Because I am creating one more thread. I have created one more thread. Now click on this complete. Click on print button. Click on this. Click print button again. So this is one thread which is doing some operations, and parallelly I am doing one more operation by using the print method. Parallel operations, these are the. So this concept is called a multi-threading. So we have so many concepts in the multi-threading, so which I'll show it to you in the live sessions. Any questions in the multi-threading in the simple concept? If you have anything, maybe you can just ask me. Like as I told you, that do database work, I'm just simply keeping this one ideal for 10 seconds, because in the database side, when you are fetching any records, maybe historical statements or something, it may take 10 seconds, or it may take 1 minute also. So that's what only for the particular reason I'm setting that thread to sleep for 10 seconds for to explain you people for better understanding purpose only. But here ideally we'll have the database operations to complete all the database operations, say for example, which is taking 10 seconds. So here I'm assigning the system ideal for 10 seconds. Think in that way, like the system is taking 10 seconds to do the complete the database operations. So I'm setting the system ideal for 10 seconds. That's the difference. No other things. Any questions for now?
I'm clear, Suresh.
Okay. Now we have one more concept called state management in the .NET, which is like a state management. In which way we can use the state management? State management can be done in two ways. One is like client side, one more is server side. In the client side, we have cookies, which will be there in our browser, and control state, hidden field, which is like it's a button control or text box control, which will not be visible to the user, but internally will save the data at the client side, and view state and query string. These are the client side state management concepts, and in the server side we have the session variables, we have the application variables, and we have the cache variables, which is like the caching techniques. Now I'll give you one example by using the web application. Now I'm executing, I have created one web application. Which is fine. Now I have one concept called is not post back. I'm removing the, I'm commenting these two. I'm commenting these two lines. Right. Now execute the page 2 again, which will give the error now. Let's so F. Now what I'm doing is on the I have two buttons which is called one label which is called page 2 and one text box which is to enter some value here, and I have one button which is a redirect to page 1, and then one more is like it's an increment one. Now when I'm clicking on this button redirect to page 1, the naming convention is different. What I'm doing is in the text box control, when I'm clicking on that redirect button, whatever the URL value I have, I'm updating that value to the text box. Say for example, I'll show it to now. I'm clicking in the URL, the ID value equal to 1. When I'm clicking on this button, I wanted to apply this one value to that text box control. Just click on this. What has happened? 1. Now on click of this increment button, I'm going to take this from the URL, this value from the URL. I just wanted to increment by 1. Now click on this increment button. Now when you click on it, I am incrementing this value to 1 now. So the value is 2. I have written the logic to do that one here. What is happening here? Now I am taking the value from the query string in the increment value. I'm converting that one to integer, then I'm adding this one plus I'm incrementing it to 1. Now the concept is like is not post back is there. Now put a breakpoint here. Now let's execute this. Click on this button now. What is happening? Again, always it is taking the information from the click F10, F10. The str value equal to 1. Now click continue. Now click on increment button. What is happening now? Again, I'm taking the value from the URL. Again, I'm assigning it to one particular variable. So what is happening? Always I'm taking the value from the URL in the page load. So this is a burden to the ASP.NET. So to avoid this one, we have a concept called is not post back, meaning when the first time the page loads, that time itself only the value will be captured in the particular control, then it will keep in that memory. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, now let's see whether it will be executed multiple times or not. Now see, Okay, now in the URL I have the requested query string, which is the value equal to 1 I have. Now I am assigning this value to string. Now click on continue button. What is happening? Now the value is captured. Now click on this redirect button. What is happening now? It is not coming inside the loop. Again, I'll show to you. Click again response.redirect button. Click F10. When you put this one, these two are not executing. So whatever the information we are fetching from the URL, that time only one time we have to get it. So we have to make sure whether we are taking one time or not, whether that is not post back is applied in the URLs or not, we have to check. Or else when we click on it, always this will be executed, and the YouTube, because of this, these two steps are also executing, so there will be a burden to the browser or to the .NET application. So we have to avoid this one. Now one more thing is, always what I'm doing here in the below examples, always I'm taking the information from the query string, right? So here also I'm taking from the query string. Here again I'm just checking the browser. So which is incorrect. I need not to take always from the browser URL. So I can store these values in the hidden field, which is, how can I create that one as a hidden field in the button? Put this one ASP button hidden field. I have given ID as a hidden, run it equal to server. Hidden field meaning it will not be visible to the user. So in the page load, for that value, that ID value, I'm assigning it to one hidden field. Now in the subsequent request, I'm using that hidden field itself only. I'm commenting this one. So I'm not taking this value from the URL now. Directly I'm taking this value from the hidden field, which I'm assigning that URL value to the hidden field on the page load within the postback. So here the performance is increasing in one step, and in the second step, I'm not taking again from the query string. I'm taking the hidden field value only here in the subsequent request. Now let's execute this one. Go to second page. Now press F10. Now I have the hidden field value, which is 1, F10. Now click on back to redirect page. Now that still, when you check that hidden field, you will have that value still, because this is the client side state management, as I told you in the description. This is the client side state management, so which it holds the information even within the post back. So I have still the value here. So what I'm doing is here, I'm clicking on increment now. Now when you press F10, still the hidden field value is 1 now. Now in the increment value, I am taking the hidden field value, which is 1. For that hidden field value, I am incrementing one value and then I'm assigning it to text box. Now run it. Run this, which is incremented by 1. So we have to use the state management concept more frequently in the ASP.NET applications. We have the state management concept like it's the client side cookies and hidden field, view state. These are the client side which we should use more frequently. And in the server side, we have to use the application variables and then session variables, so that it will be easier and then it will be improve the performance, rather than taking always from the URL, and then rather than executing the statement always within the page. Any questions for now?